Welcome to another video cast where I interview super cool people who have done some super awesome stuff and lived amazing lives. I'm Cindy Lou Barlow, and today I'm going to interview my dear friend and business coach, Jane Pollack. I have been working with Jane for about a year now, and oh my goodness, she has taken me through some really big life changes. I was able to publish my book this year. I worked on my business, changed things around. She gave me a lot of clarity. One thing I love and love about Jane is that she has this like super gentle way of bringing you along, but at the same time, she could be really like focused. And I needed it in so many ways. So I'm going to bring her in here in just a moment. I'm going to just pause for a second. So here is Jane Pollack. Welcome, Jane, to my podcast. And thank you so much for taking time today. I know you're a very busy woman, so I feel very blessed that you would come and teach us a few things about being a woman entrepreneur and being an artist and a mother and a human being trying to find their way in this world.
Aren't we all? And so different now with the pandemic.
Yes.
So I'm not that busy anymore.
So we're in the midst of a pandemic, and when this gets listened to years later, we'll be remembering that we had this time, which was, it's a time where we've really had to reevaluate and refigure things out, haven't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get into that in just a second. Before we do, I just want to just let people know that I just let, in my introduction, I told people that you helped me publish my first book, and you're a 3-time author. Could you show us the books that you published?
Yes, thank you. My first book was Decorating Eggs. Let me get the glare off of it. Exquisite Designs with Wax and Dye, which was the craft I was doing back in the 90s and I had done for 30 years. So that was great. This is a hardcover. It went into paperback and is still in paperback. I think you have Sole Proprietor there, so I'll let you hold that up.
Okay. Yeah, I have Sole Proprietor here. And you know what's so funny? As I went online to Amazon, this book is selling for $499 and I thought, well, you could hire Jane for that much for a month.
What? Wait, I'll have to get out some of my old copies and compete. And then my most recent is Too Much of Not Enough. And that's my memoir that came out a year ago, exactly a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That was last year. So you and I both published a book the same year. You published it at the beginning of the year. I published it at the end of the year.
Thank goodness we're not worrying about, book tours or,
right now.
We launched and that was great.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm very grateful. So many things. But, my daughter got married last July. It's like,
right.
I'm grateful sort of in the scheme of things. This couldn't have come at a better time. If you want to be, practical about it.
Yeah. Like you got a lot done last year and it set you up for what we're going through right now this year. And one of the things I want to say about each of these books, they kind of tell a little bit of a story because you started off decorating eggs. And, I just think that the egg is such a feminine symbol. I mean, it's like, who else but the feminine has an egg, right? And
That's
so
right.
you decorated eggs in this, and you were a stay-at-home mom at the time, is that right? Or you were working from home?
I learned the craft. I was in my early 20s and I learned the craft teaching high school art. And then I had my daughter a couple of years later and I stopped teaching and I was really a full-time mom, but I would do an occasional workshop, give a class, and exhibit my work. And the funny thing is I was a long-time breastfeeding mom. I nursed each of my kids for 3 years. I just thought it was the greatest thing I know to do for them. And meanwhile, I was doing the eggs. Well, there's a novel out now by a Japanese author called Breasts and Eggs. And my kids we had a family Zoom call now. It's like, Mom, the perfect book for you. And it's like, do you want to sum up my life, breasts and eggs? Because they were two things that brought me to who I am.
Wow.
I got so much confidence from the La Leche League when I was nursing and learning from other women. That was a huge learning curve in my life to hear the truth spoken and to be able to rely on that. So that was big. And then the eggs, it was interesting because egg is a perfect form. It's a perfect form. And when you're doing something on 2 dimensions, you have to figure out how you're going to get to the edges and, how you want it framed. But with an egg, you turn it around and then it's done. So it was this little perfection. So it spoke to me the way no other. I was always a 2-dimensional artist. And so there was something about the egg that gave it the 3rd dimension that I loved. I loved holding it. I loved the feel of it. I loved the sentiment of it, that, that it was a symbol of life. Everything about it was so meaningful for me.
Well, and not only did you make the eggs, but that you sold them and you had to market them and you had to learn how to do that, which is, there's a lot of the stories in Sole Proprietor about how you went about doing this. And I love this one story, and you have to tell me because you don't really go into it, but you said Steve Jobs called you.
I did.
Tell us about that.
That's another story. That was such a great story. So I was in my studio one summer afternoon, and my assistant at the time, Jody Fisher, comes in. She's carrying a catalog. So this was in the days of direct mail, and it was the Flax catalog, and they had a competition if you could include their logo into your artworks. Anyhow, we started thinking about it, and eventually I did this submission, and you have to look really closely. So it's the Flax catalog, and there's their logo. You see the F?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it was worked into the design, and it went out to 1.2 million people across the country. So it was a huge hit. And as a result, I got a call from the director of retail operations at the Guggenheim Museum, and they ordered my eggs to be there. And then I get this call from Steve Jobs, who in 1991 was not who Steve Jobs, is today. And it's like, that name is familiar, but I didn't, I was like, I think he's famous, but I had no idea. Anyhow, he called me, and he said, he said, how much are your eggs? And I said, I think there were 125 each at the time in 1991. And he was like, oh. He said, well, I'd like 2. First he said he wanted 4, and then I said, how much are they? And I said 125, and he said, well, I'll take 2. And I thought, that was cheap, and so I said, so somewhere in their home maybe are 2 of my eggs.
Oh,
which
wow.
was really exciting. Yeah. And I know what a perfectionist he was, so it was really, really exciting to have Steve Jobs appreciate my work.
Yes. Yes. And not only Steve Jobs, you were called to the White House.
Yes. Actually, 4 times. I got 4 invitations to the White House. That was my first credential. I mean, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was teaching after-school art classes in my family room with, 1 kid on my back and 1 kid taking the class. It was just crazy. And the phone rang one day and they said, we're calling from the White House. Would you consider decorating an egg for the annual Easter egg event? So that was 1985, I think. And it was like, I've been recognized. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, that was in the Reagan administration. And ever since then, it was a credential. People say she has eggs in the White House. She has eggs in the Smithsonian. I thought, wow, they're not actually in the White House. They were on display on the lawn for one afternoon. They're now in the Smithsonian somewhere, which is, the Smithsonian is vast. But the credential was amazing. And I still have Nancy Reagan's letter framed, because I thought my mailman's going to be really impressed. I'm getting a letter from the White House.
Wow.
So it was just this great credential, and people buy status. My art didn't change. The fact that I was recognized by Steve Jobs, by the White House, gave it that imprimatur of success. So, nothing about me changed, but that was a real signal to me that you want to have third-party endorsement, and the better the third party, in our perception, the more exciting the endorsement is.
So I want to just talk about how that works, because Steve Jobs wasn't Steve Jobs, as you said back then, but that is a huge endorsement, and that was luck to some degree, but it also had to do with your hard work. How do people find that place where because everybody's looking for something like that? Is it just luck? Is it just being in the right place at the right time? Is there some magical formula that?
There are a couple of, there's a wonderful saying a friend of mine used to say. She said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So it's being out there. And Earl Nightingale, who was the original guru of motivational speakers, said that luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. So, there are times where I might have been lucky and met the right person. I have a friend who was on the Today Show, and then he didn't know what to do with it. So you have to, have the machine going. And luck is very temporary. You get the hit, something happens, and then how do you use it? How do you capitalize on your luck? But I think, uh, I still listen to tapes all the time, or now audio, MP3s. But there was a woman who said if Lucky Breaks got labeled, everybody would have them, like, this property, this stock, whatever it is. So you have to be out there all the time, trying different things, just staying in the game, curling up in the fetal position, in your bed, or, hunkering down isn't going to get you noticed. Now, hunkering down has a different meaning today than it did, in the 80s, 90s, aughts, and so on.
We're
But
hunkering up.
hunkering up, yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people who are having great successes during the pandemic. My daughter just got a book contract. My younger daughter got a writing job in Hollywood. You just stay in the game, and you don't use circumstances as an excuse for giving up. You just keep going in whatever way, shape, or form you're able to. I want the message to be positive, not punishing, but keep showing up. There are buyers out there in every term.
And as a coach, that is what I really noticed, is that you were always like, I love, one of the things you used to say to me all the time was the difference between as a karate master and a
yes, a black belt or brown belt.
Yeah, the difference between a brown belt and a black belt. Why don't you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so I hope it's not apocryphal, but they said that the skill level is the same. It's it's how quickly they recover. So, when you're down and out, I guess the black belt gets up immediately or within seconds, and the brown belt might take, a minute or 5 minutes. So how quickly do you bounce back? Resilience is really what we're talking about here. And it's, we can go around wounded and say, well, I got rejected and they didn't like it. But it's like, okay, now what? How are you going to pivot? How are you going to try that differently? And even as I'm saying this, I'm talking to myself. It's like, okay, Jane, there were things you wanted to let go of now, but give it another try, because, I love the saying, don't quit before the miracle. It's that constantly trying and, putting yourself out there. I think that's what, our egos have a hard time, but our spirit says, yes, we've got to do this.
And, one of the things that I could very easily say about you is that you are a self-made woman. You really have gone through lots of different chapters of your life. Like, we're talking about this first chapter where you were a stay-at-home mom. Pretty much you were an entrepreneur with your eggs. You were selling them. You were getting out there. You had to make phone calls. You got rejected. You had to do all of those things. You're taking care of kids, nursing them for 3 years, making these incredibly gorgeous eggs, and having to put them out there and figure out where you are in the market, all of those things. Then you move on to writing a book called, and I love the title of this book, Soul Proprietor. It's so feminine, so you move on to writing this book. Tell us a little bit about this phase of your development.
That was a very conscious book for me to write. So I thought, I wrote Decorating Eggs. I'm a published author, it sold, many copies. It did really well. I got nice royalties. And I wanted to speak about being an entrepreneur, and Decorating Eggs was not a platform to speak. People weren't saying, who's the egg decorator? And by the way, being an egg decorator, while it's unique and wonderful and I have great stories, a lot of people are like, oh, that's nice, and just like, would walk away. They're not interested. And exactly. They'd say, wow, how do you do that? I mean, people are very judgmental, and rightfully so. But I wanted to have a platform to speak, to talk about being an entrepreneur, because I loved public speaking. I had joined Toastmasters. I wanted to get out and let people know what I was doing and how to set goals and how to market. I love sharing that information because I had this extraordinary story. And so I thought, well, at the time I was the president of the Entrepreneurial Women's Network in Westport, Connecticut. And my sister was there was a newsletter that went out, and I think it was mailed, and my sister was a literary agent, and she was receiving it. And she said, Jane, you tell a good story. So I thought, well, I'll put some of these lessons I've learned together. And so I thought, 101 lessons makes a lot of sense. And then and then I joined I actually created a writer's group where we had to, write, every month, 10 pages or something. Anyhow, over time, I realized I had something to say. But my intent, and I had a strong intention that it would be a vehicle for my speaking. And that was exactly what it was. As soon as it came out, I got lined up to speak, because now I wasn't an expert in decorating eggs. I was an expert in entrepreneurship. And so it took me to a whole other level. And I joined the National Speakers Association and got a reputation for being a lifestyle entrepreneur, which meant that my business works for me. I don't work for my business, which is different than something like how I built this, where people are building vast fortunes. I'm building something where it synchronizes with my life beautifully, because here I was raising kids, working from home, and still earning money and having a lovely reputation develop from that.
Yeah. And, one of the things I love about this book, one of the things that you say in this book, one of the chapters that I earmark, I've earmarked several of them. And this is a great book to just use when you wake up in the morning and you just read one chapter, it just gets you ready for the day. But you talk about this chapter on what makes you unique, makes you successful. And I think that in this world of Facebook and Instagram, and it seems like everybody's trying to do the same thing. And where do you find your niche? And one of the things that did make you unique was that you made eggs. I mean, who does that, right? How many people do that? So can you talk a little bit about how you use uniqueness?
That story, Barbara Walters is still around, but she was the interviewer back in the day, and she's interviewing Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he said, everybody told me, lose the accent, change your name. Nobody will remember Schwarzenegger. And who cares about bodybuilding? And he was, he brought the fitness movement to this country. So ignore the naysayers. I certainly gained reputation by doing what was unique to me. Now I'm coaching, which, everybody and their brother is a coach, so it's much harder. But what I feel is that I have a consistent message over time. I've been blogging since 2008, I believe. I have over 1,000 posts. So if anybody looks me up, they're going to get a very consistent message. I'm not the flavor of the month. And I don't want 1,000 customers. I can't handle 1,000 customers. So I have had a steady, influx of people to work with over, 30, 40-year career. And that's successful for me. So I'm not a one-hit wonder. I don't have 1 million followers. I don't care about that. I do care that that people who are attracted to me are pre-vetted because they like what my message is. And they want what I have, which is a well-balanced lifestyle, a deep spiritual life and joy, and there aren't a lot of people who can say that. So, I think we're all titillated by numbers. It's like, she got 26 million followers. It's like, so what? So what? Where does that take you? That sort of compare and despair. I don't want that. And one thing my daughter, who's just a brilliant entrepreneur herself, she said, I said, should I be on Twitter? She said, Mom, pick what works for you and stick with it. So I've been on Facebook, and I know Facebook has had problems, and I have a social media team who helps me post on Instagram and Twitter, and I don't know how many people are coming to me from that, but my groups get filled and I have enough clients. So that's my, I know we'll talk about success, but that's my measure of success is I'm still here. That the Stephen Sondheim, song, and I'm still here.
I'm still here, right? Well,
yeah.
Also, I think another aspect of that is that what you were talking about is your spirituality and your values. And I think especially as women, and I believe you only work with women, am I right?
Yes, I've had a few male clients who are delightful, but I seem to speak the language. It's the breasts and eggs things going.
Yeah. Really, you should just make that your website.
There we are. Now that's branding. There you go.
And that could be your bumper sticker too.
That will be memorable.
But I think part of it too is also that, as women, we're like right now as women, we are looking at, trying to have it all, right? We talked about this a little bit in the first, second, and third wave feminism. And I think women nowadays think, well, everything is available to me. I should be able to have it all. And it's impossible to have it all. We've talked about this. It's it's impossible because there's only so many kids you can have, so much time you have, to have the whole shebang, it's impossible. So where do you go? And you start really with what is of value to you and what success actually looks like. So if you were to talk to your younger self about success and talk to your now self about success, how would you describe to yourself what success
I know I wrote something brilliant down when I thought about this. Let me just see where that I want to give it to you.
By the way, I want to say you are a brilliant writer. I love
Thank
reading
you.
your words. They are very
Oh,
inspiring.
yeah. Oh, here's what I wrote down, and I like it. It's like, where you are is perfect. Where I am right now today in the pandemic is perfect. Where I was raising 3 kids and, and working in my home office, it was perfect. And to actually, I think the more we are in the now, anybody, the more we can measure our own success. Going back to your having it all, and then people would say, well, not all at once. So I have a beautiful family of successful children, grandchildren, like check, I got that. And my marriage fell apart. So, so that didn't work. I can't think of anybody who has it all. I can't think of one woman who has it all. Martha Stewart? No. Meryl Streep? Maybe. I don't think so. You can't. Because there, as you said, there aren't enough hours in the day. I used to have, and it was one thing I can't find when I moved. It was 4 like Tibetan banners. It said, "Desire what you have." And I think the more we can be happy and satisfied with what actually is. And so, I want to say from this day, I think we're in day 71 or 2 of the pandemic right now when we're speaking, I am feeling joy like I've never felt. I picked up a new craft to me right before the pandemic. I'm going to show a little show and tell.
Yeah, please.
They're called penny rugs. And so I am making this.
Goodness.
This is that's for my daughter. I've been sewing like crazy, hand sewing. I love the, I love the feel of the eggs. I love the feel of the wool. These are beautiful wills, stitching, designing, the days are flying by. And I thought, how lucky am I to have no pressure? I don't have to get on the subway and go someplace. I'm eating good food. My apartment is kind of clean, not great. I'm learning new things. And I feel connected because we're all in the same boat right now. It's the only time I remember in my whole life that we're all in the same boat. And I'm happy. I'm healthy. It's just, it's this miraculous time. And so I share that not as a brag, but to say where you are right now is just right. And whatever you created. So I'm here by myself. I don't have anybody I'm living with. I only have to take care of myself, which is plenty of work. I like to eat a particular way. And it's all, and then I'm active in a fellowship, and I, get to a meeting every day, talk to people every day, go to bed early, get culture. I read something. I'm reading a great book that my daughter sent me about. This is a chef from New York who opened up a restaurant called Prune. It's her memoir. I'm watching, wonderful things on Netflix. Just time has this unusual quality to it. And we don't know what's next. It's, God wants us in the present moment. Somebody said Mother Nature has put us all in our rooms, so here we are, and what do I have to learn from this?
Yeah.
That I can be joyful in my day where I am with what I have. And I would, say that to my younger self, but I want this, but I want to be this, I want to be that. And then you achieve it. I had a best-selling book. My egg book made best-selling, I think over 5,000 or 10,000 copies is best-selling. And then it's gone, and then what? Steve Jobs recognized me, and then what? Then where are you? You wake up again the next day. I saw, I always watch the Tony Awards, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who won everything for Hamilton, he said, and at 12:15 or 1:15 a.m. when it's all over, he said, everybody is out looking for a cab. They don't care that you just won the Tony Award. They want to get home. It's fleeting. And it's what's inside that matters. The awards are nice, but they're fleeting.
Yeah, I've had that experience also where, I've won something, or I've had, big success, like with a film or something. And when it's over, it is a little bit lonely. It's like, well, I thought that was going to be like the thing. And really, I'm just still here with me. And
there you go.
I've got to have the thing here, right?
That's exactly right. I had with my eggs, I had 4 pages in something called Country Home Magazine, which was a beautiful, beautiful glossy magazine. And my friend Patty said to me, how long do 4 pages last? And I thought that was a great question.
Yeah.
And I would get to shows with me, but basically, a couple of days I was high. I mean, it's adrenaline. It's a rush.
Yeah.
And I think I'll talk for myself. I would get high on the next offer, the next opportunity. And then there's a crash, because now who's paying attention? Who cares?
Well, and it also can lead to sort of addiction. I mean, that's what sort of like we get with Facebook or other things like that. There's just these moments of hits and we want more. We want, a
Right.
little bit more of those endorphin hits. And to be content and to be balanced is, as you said, to be here now and to be present.
Yeah.
I want to
I heard
segue into
someone say that she said the opposite of addiction is connection. And so this,
exactly.
is what feeds my
Connecting.
soul.
Yeah, connecting here, connecting,
Yes.
and yeah, connecting. So, but I do want to segue into your other
Yeah.
book that you're
Yeah.
now you are actually speaking regularly with. You actually are doing some groups with, and I would love to hear how this book came about. And again, it's like all of your books in a way are a memoir of you and where you
Yeah.
are at that time in your life. But to create a memoir, that's huge. That's a lot. Also putting yourself out there like that's got to
Yeah.
be
Yeah. It is
really
huge.
nerve wracking.
I it just, for people who, haven't read it, I had a marriage that was 38 years old, and my husband came home one day, or actually he said, I'm in, I'm in love with somebody else, which was not in my script. So, so that was 2009, he moved out and I had to change. I mean, to me, marriage was my higher power. Like, I wanted to be, one of the things I say in the book was, we were at a wedding or bar mitzvah or something, and the band leader is like, okay, everybody up on the dance floor, and if you're married 5 years or less, go sit down. 10 years or less, go sit down. And I thought, I want to be the last couple standing. That was my value. Now that that's over, the myth of that is over. It's like, what was that? What was that? Had been my higher power. And I suffered a lot at the hands of trying to make a marriage work because I thought that was what it was all about. And I'm, in some ways more joyful than I've ever been in my life. So when the marriage ended, I moved into New York City, and that had been a fantasy of mine and a vision of mine for many years. I raised my family in Connecticut, which is a wonderful, wonderful place. And I again, I don't regret a minute of anything that happened or how long it took. And then I moved here and I met somebody who had just completed something called Semester at Sea. She had gone around the world, and it's like, I would like to do that. And she, I went online immediately and booked it for January of 2014 and figured out how I could take 3 months off. And I did that. And before I moved to New York, I went online. I started dating online at 62 and met a wonderful man. And we had a 6.5-year relationship that was blissful. I felt truly loved for the first time. Like, what my parents gave me, what my husband gave me was not what this man and what I had learned to understand and value of being loved as being seen and respected and cherished. And none of that, up until 62, I had experienced none of that except from some of my female friends, where I thought, oh, this is how it should feel. So when I got back from the trip around the world, I took a class at Kripalu, which is a yoga center in Lenox, Mass, on taking your story to the stage with a wonderful instructor, Anne Randolph. And we started writing, and we would read out loud, 2 minutes. We would each read 2 minutes. And people started coming up to me and they said, that inspires me. Your stories are memorable. You should publish. So I started taking more writing classes. And because I'd written a couple of books, I knew that, it's a long process. And I wasn't quite sure what it was. So that was 2014. The book came out in 2019. So it was a 5-year process, but very important for me to understand, who am I in the story, to understand that I was not a victim, that I was a co-creator in all of it. Maybe not so much with my family of origin, because up until 18, I think we are victims of our circumstance. We don't have the agency that we have as adults. But after that, I couldn't take space. It took me a long time to take space from my mother, who was very difficult, a very, very critical, judgmental, harsh woman. And so all the lessons I learned, and then I kind of married. I didn't marry. He wasn't harsh and critical. He was more neglectful, and that was something else that I suffered from. But I was a partner in that. I didn't say that doesn't work for me. I was just like, let me try to be cuter, funnier, thinner, prettier, more entertaining, rather than saying, let's see how we can make this work. And somebody said, what if you'd gotten divorced, 15 years earlier? It's like, I don't know. I can't even think about that, because I had no place to go. I had no mother to go home to. I didn't have my own resources. it had to take, like I said, you're perfect where you are. It had to take exactly what it took. So a 38-year marriage, and now, learning what I've learned as a result of all that. So that's what the book is about. And when you read my story, you see somebody who is constantly making decisions like, that doesn't work, let me try something else, let me try something else. And then with La Leche League and 12-step recovery and therapy and all the groups that I charged, I started to make some changes. I said to a best friend, I can't do this anymore. It was too painful. I wasn't being seen and appreciated. And slowly, the world turned, and I got better and better friends, people who did cherish me. And so I feel very uplifted. I feel, in the center of my own life now, and that I love my life. I love the people I surround myself with now. And
Remember this quote I just read from the I Ching. It says, go to the places where you are valued.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I feel that way. People have my back. I'm not going to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And that's new. I have to be reminded of it. And there's a saying that repetition is nature's only form of permanence. So I have to keep doing the things I do to maintain that. I can't fall back, to my old ways. And now I have a web of people who hold me up, which is wonderful. My friend says, you have a cloud of witnesses. And so my cloud is around me. And sometimes I wander off, but I get in touch with people very quickly now. Whereas I wanted to wait for somebody to see how miserable I was to call me. I don't do that anymore. That didn't work.
One thing I really love about your book, and as an actor, whenever I'm looking at a scene, like in a movie or play, or just maybe if I'm working with another actor and we're rehearsing a scene, there's always two questions I always ask, and it's like, where is the love and where is the humor? And I think that your book has, plenty of wonderful moments where it's very humorous. Even the very beginning story,
Yeah.
is pretty hilarious. And I really admire people who can write humor. I don't feel like I'm that good at it. And I have some friends that are just so great at it. And so that's just that's really amazing that you have that part of your voice, intact, because you add humor to things in such a wonderful way. And as a coach, when we worked together, there were lots of times we just laughed at what was going on because, get to this point where it's like, it is pretty hilarious, how seriously
Thank
we
you
take
for that.
ourselves.
Yeah. I think I used to be serious as a heart attack, and I've lightened up a lot. I don't take myself that seriously. Thank God. Thank God. Yeah.
And, I also think that comes with experience. I remember, in my 20s and 30s, there was such a need to prove, and there's still a need to prove. I'm not, don't get me wrong, and I think as women, we have this constant need to prove, like, like we're supposed to always look good. We're supposed to sound good. We're supposed to have the perfect children, the perfect husband, the perfect life. And there's so much pressure about how good we're always supposed to be, where there's just this need, again, especially with social media, to prove that you've got a good life or you're doing it. And, can you speak to this constant need to prove? Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I'm somewhat susceptible, but I think that, the pandemic has been, especially seeing everybody's rooms now, on Zoom, all these famous people. And it's like, that's not such a great place. There's this leveling effect that's going on. And I think taking media breaks is a good idea because we're constantly bombarded with it. But it goes back to values. And this wonderful book, go back to this, her book, where she's running a restaurant in the East Village. It's compare and despair. So when I'm in the moment, when I'm doing what I love doing, I don't think about what anybody else is doing. They call it being in the flow. That there's a book called Flow. I love that. So it's up to me, how much am I going to look and how much am I going to take in? And so, I would say to people listening to this, like, take a step back from all the media. who is really happy? And there was a book in Soul Proprietor. There was a story I told about a woman who raised tomatoes, and she was, she could make like $20,000 and have everything in life that she wanted. So it's like living within our means and having our means not define us is so attractive to me. And the people to me who are happiest are the people who are doing what they love, living within their means, and sharing that with the people around them. It's not an audience of millions. We can't please all those people. So it's, what am I doing in these 24 hours, and who am I hanging out with? And it's really not going to that ooh shiny place, because it doesn't exist. It's fleeting.
It's defining what abundance looks like for you, and not what it looks like for someone else.
And staying that, putting your stake in the ground and saying, that's my value. Yeah. And all this other stuff, no, thank you. I don't need that.
So tell us, how does one discover their values? Do you have any tools?
I do. I have an exercise. It's, in coaching, we call it a peak experience. So think back to a time in your life where you were cooking on all burners. Like, when were you just joyful? What can, if you can remember back to that time. So one thing that occurs to me is I was in the original Mount Holyoke College Summer Theater in 1970. I designed the logo. I was a designer. There were 20 or so of us. We put on 8 shows in 10 weeks. I mean, it was crazy. But what was in there? There was community, which is a value I've always had, creativity, appreciation for what I was doing, hard work, and being with like-minded people. And so, I can take that experience and put it into where I am today. I have my community. I'm doing work that I love. It's the creative work. I just don't know how I would ever have made it as an accountant or a dry cleaner or something, where there's some creativity, but not much. I mean, I love the variety in my day. I love color. I love handwork. I love being engaged. So for you to think about what, is it cooking? Is it the aromas? That there's something in there that you value, and to come up with what those values are, whether it's giving back, whether it's, being of service. I'm a good listener. So I take a lot of calls from people and just listen. That, that's great. And at the Mount Holyoke Summer Theater, there was just a lot of opportunity to talk and be heard and all that. So, take a microcosm that was very happy for you and pick out, what are the values? Was it family? Was it serenity? Was it intensity? And those are the things that you want to create in your life, not 24/7 necessarily, but can you have a couple of hours of those a day? And so for people who are working jobs that aren't fully creative, can you get up a half an hour earlier and do something that's creative? Because if you feed yourself first, if you pay yourself first, doing what you love, whether it's writing a screenplay or, designing a dress or singing an aria, you can get through, that'll feed you for the whole day. So that's what I recommend to my clients, to begin doing something in the direction of your vision, of your dream, because that will feed your soul. And if your soul is fed, I always like the saying, rising tide lifts all boats. If you're feeling good, then I can, now that I'm sewing these pillows and I'm going to do a wall hanging for my kitchen, I'm going to go and vacuum my bedroom later. It's like not top of my list, but there's a layer of dust and I want to do that. But I'm energized by having fed my soul first.
Yeah. When you said that thing about doing that very first, I got this image of, like the reason people drink coffee is because they want like that high in the morning so that it gets them through the day. And if you're doing something that really feeds your soul, that feeds your creativity, that gets your muse charged, then you are going to look at the day a lot differently.
Very differently. And I do have clients who say, I did everything. And then at 4 or 5 o'clock, I was too tired. It's like, that's right. Do this first. Don't answer your phone. Don't look at email. Don't even turn on the computer until 9 or 10. Those precious, those golden hours, whenever they are for you. And I have a friend who starts writing at 10:30 at night. He's a night owl, and he'll go from 10 to 2. It's like, that's my prime sleep time. So you have to figure out what works for you and go with your own rhythms, but make sure that you get paid every day to do something that feeds your soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask a question about in your coaching practice, and you don't have to use me as an example.
You're a shining
there
example.
are lots of examples we could come up with, but what what do you find stumps people the most, especially women?
Yeah,
They're the most
I think perfection, and if I can use you as an example, I
oh
think,
no.
well, the thing that was a breakthrough for you was really getting your business in order. What are your agreements with your clients, and how do you address that, and how do you put that up front, and how do you get paid? Women are afraid to ask for money, or at least, in my generation, we were afraid. So when you get those lined up, what I had to learn when I was selling my eggs is, there'd be somebody looking and go, oh, they're so beautiful. Oh my gosh, they're so beautiful. I said, well, which ones do you like? Well, that one or that one. So I go, MasterCard or Visa? How would you like to pay for that? You've got to close. I had to learn how to help them make the decision. And so when you get that in order, then it begins to flow because your client is more comfortable because you're more comfortable. But where people get stuck is perfectionism. Like it should look a particular way. I have a friend, we're actually action partners. She said, I just imagine you being so organized. And so I took a picture of my desk, which is a tornado. And I sent it to her. I said, I'm not organized. I know where things are, but I'm not organized. With people in the pandemic, you see the classrooms they've set up for their children, and they're like immaculate and, perfect. It's like, oh God, that's so not me. So to appreciate my own style, but I think women get, we're taught, about having it all. It should look this way. Your house should be pristine, and you should, have great sex all night and cook 3 meals and whatever it is. A myth. It's a myth.
Yeah.
So I think perfectionism is one. And let me just see what else. I think I wrote down something else. Can't find it.
Well, it may come up.
Yeah.
One of the other things I think, because you're working with people sometimes who know they want to do something, they're not sure what it is. How do you know you're in the right business and that you're doing the right thing?
As I talk, I actually in Sole Proprietor, I said, where are your feet? I don't know if you remember that one, but
Yeah.
what are you doing anyway? And it's like, well, no matter what, I have to read 20 pages of my book, or I have to cook something for the family. It's like, where, what you do is your passion, most likely. And it could be, there are people who are professional organizers. They just love organizing space and cleaning out drawers. It's like, great, you can do that. That, not exciting for me. I mean, I like one drawer, but, but notice what you're doing anyway, what lights you up. And it could be talking to friends. Great. There's a business in that. It's called coaching. You have to learn how to, be the listener. But I think there's something inherent in whatever it is that you love. And I can tell, even when I'm on the phone, I can hear what lights somebody up. You can feel a change in the energy. That's, when you're coaching, that you have to be really sensitive to that. So it's like, wait a second, when you just talked about that, that's where I hear joy. Oh yeah, you're right. But I think we deny ourselves. I thought when I went to college that I would major in French and be a translator at the UN, because that sounded very nice. I had no interest in that. No interest in that. It was just like something that sounded good. So I think some of us are sold a bill of goods, or like, you should be a lawyer because you're this. Well, I hate conflict. Why would I want to be a lawyer?
Right.
So,
there's so many hours involved in that. It's a really hard job. Especially if you want to have a family, right? If you're interested in having that as well. Yeah.
My son became a lawyer, and he said it was, it was upsetting to him. He stopped. And he said my ex-husband and I are both teachers. We met at Teachers College, and he said, if you weren't teachers, I would have taught. And now he's teaching, and he's very happy teaching.
Oh,
he's doing very high-end tutoring, and he's doing very well with that. Yeah. So some of us are predisposed or think we have to do something, but your gut, like, are you happy? As is time flowing by? Then you're in the right thing. When I'm coaching, when I'm speaking in front of group, oh my God, I'm in another dimension. I love it. And time, I'm not hungry, I'm not angry, it's like, I'm very present. And I think that's another measure, is like, are you in the present moment when you're doing what you love doing, when you're doing your work?
Yeah. Well, and it also sounds like that service has to be a part of that in some way, that you are giving something of worth to someone else.
When somebody like you, when you got your book published, when your clients just started lining up to come in, oh my gosh, maybe you were happier, but I'm not sure. I feel such joy when my clients, have that kind of breakthrough. I have a client who's an artist, and she was doing goldsmithing and painting and caustic painting and photography. And she was very enamored of manila rope. And so she's like, I don't know where to spend my time. And so my assignment to her was, how about for 90 days, just do the rope? I don't know. And she is doing like these, almost 6-figure commissions in rope now because she focused on it. And that's another, tip I have is like, stay with one thing. Doesn't mean you can't do the other things eventually, but you can't do 6 things well at the same time. So focus on one thing and get that going. That rising tide lifts all boats. And so she's had, years of, orders and beautiful stuff. And she's so happy. And that, that just thrills me when they take my challenge, when a client takes my challenge and says, that was really, really helpful, to listen for what really lights me up. So, and to narrow our focus. There's time. And if there isn't time, well, that's okay too. At least you're doing what you love doing for this time being.
And that's what's wonderful about having a coach, because you can't really sometimes find that by yourself. You need somebody to reflect something back or to hear you in a certain way to go, how about that? And then you come in. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm working with a woman now who is, a lot of people spread themselves too thin, hoping, well, maybe this will catch or this will catch or this will catch. And I say, you decide what catches. You do what you want to do. Like the eggs, it was funny. You had sent me some questions to think about, and you talked about failure. And when I was introduced
that's where I was going to go just now.
Okay, good. Okay.
You're reading my mind now.
Good. Oh, that's, we're aligned. Yes. When I started teaching, I learned how to do quilts. It was the early 70s, and there was a resurgence of interest in patchwork quilts because it was coming up to the bicentennial, 200 years of America. And so I caught it at the very beginning of the wave. And I started making quilts, and I was doing my eggs. And so people would, come over to my house. I said, look, and they would look at my quilts and they go, oh, and they look at my eggs. How do you do that? Do you have any more? It's like, but I want to quilt. I want to be a quilter. Nobody paid any attention to my quilts, none. And I entered a contest. There was a quilt making contest, and you had to do a square, and I worked really hard on it. It had a lot of pieces, and it was like, I didn't even get an honorable mention. I got nothing. And there are a few things where I just kept trying and failing and trying and failing. And then what I did was I started doing quilt patterns on my eggs. And then I started getting into all these magazines. So it wasn't that I wasn't a quilter. I was just applying it to the wrong surface. And you can see my background is, a quilt, not that I made, but one of my clients at one time made. But, it's, we can want something really badly, but I wasn't gifted enough at that medium to make it successful. And, I listen to tons of podcasts, and you hear people talking about success. One of them, I'm pretty sure it was Judd Apatow. And when he was like 8 or 9 years old, he was going around with a microphone interviewing like Seinfeld, he was calling people up. I mean, people who are really successful are doing all kinds of crazy things really early and really constantly. And I wasn't that constant at it. So I realized that where your feet are, what you just love doing, trust that that's where you will have your success.
There's one thing about failure, and when I just don't think that any of us are immune to what you feel like when you just feel like you've just failed at something, or you screwed something up, or, like you can't take it back, or whatever, whatever happens. What are 3 things that you could suggest to someone if they've failed at something that they set out to do? Or, what are like 3 quick things you could just write down and, post it up on your refrigerator to remind yourself the next time you fail at something?
Right. And, again, I'm sort of preempting. You asked, what's my kryptonite? It's like criticism. It's like, oh God, but ask for feedback. What was it? And that was so hard for me, because I thought, if I'm not 100% successful, I'm a failure. I mean, that was kind of black and white thinking. And my mother, was such a narcissist that if we weren't reflecting glory to her, then we were just cast in the shadows. So I had this very high bar to jump through and a very small hoop to jump through. So ask for feedback to say, what about my quilt square didn't work? and people are willing to give it to you, and it doesn't mean they don't like you. I used to think if I didn't, if I didn't succeed, I wouldn't be liked. There's no correlation between those. So ask for feedback, look at what other people are doing, and it's not a compare and despair, but it's like, I had an intern once her father was a very successful graphic designer in Boston, and she was interning for me for the month of January. It was fantastic, and she brought me like a ton of resumes that people had submitted. Not that I was applying for jobs, but I just wanted to see what a resume looked like. And some of them were visually stunningly creative. I didn't even know what the competition was doing. So understand your competition. Look at the other quilt squares. Well, wow, that's really intricate and it's really beautifully done. And so look at what other people are doing, and then maybe change directions. Well, is that do I do more? Do I try harder? Or what I did was I started applying the quilt patterns to the eggs. So that was an amazing success. It was incredibly innovative. The eggs then became jewelry pieces, and I mean, it was wildly successful. So look for a way to use what you have and just change it a little bit to see what the market will bear.
I think that's a really interesting viewpoint, because as artists, we like to feel very unique. We like to feel like, this is what I do. This is what makes
Right.
me. And so we want to fit everyone into our art and our way of being. And so, you were able to find something that you really liked and were able to flow through that. But, how is it, like there are poets and writers and visual artists and actors, and, everybody has a uniqueness, right? And some people, like Picasso, or, like when we even think of someone like, she's coming to my mind.
Van Gogh had no success in his lifetime.
Who's that?
Van Gogh had no success in his lifetime.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking of. Van Gogh, like no success. And I'm just thinking of different singers that, when they first started out, everyone's like, what are they singing about? What this is about? And then, and then they blew up. When do you stay with your uniqueness and who you are, and when do you become flexible?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think you never give up. Winston Churchill said, never, never, ever, 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 in one of his commencement speeches, never give up. So it's picking yourself and, getting back into the game, because you may not, I don't have an audience of millions, but my audience is very faithful to me. They love what I do. There was no market for eggs. I created a market for eggs. There was no market for eggshell jewelry, and it became, I sold pretty much everything I ever made. So I think it's, if you have to feed a family, that's a different story. And there's some, some things, concessions you have to make. But you're probably not going to be an artist then. I probably would have, if my job was supporting the family, I probably would have taught and done the art on the side until there was a shift there. So I'm not one to, I never say quit the day job. I never say that, but keep your hand in what it is that you love. Mm-hmm. And, what is the pinnacle? We were talking about, you get the award, and then what?
Yeah.
So it's really
like, what does success really look like? When do you know
exactly.
you've actually been successful? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think success is, one day at a time. What looked successful a year ago just isn't making it today. I mean, look at theater. It's, for now it's gone.
Yeah.
So what is success? And how do you translate that? So, I just saw Cynthia Nixon do a 9-minute monologue on Facebook that was fantastic. So resilience and doing what you have in the place that you are, work with what you have where you are. Yeah. And to me, success can be measured at the end of every day. I had a successful day. Is it a lifetime? I don't know. I think this pandemic is bringing up very philosophical questions on what is success and by whose measure, by whose standards.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, as we're looking at this time, we've all had time to slow down, think about our values, obviously, and figure out what our next moves are going to be. So we need to finish up here. I could talk to you forever because
I know it's wonderful.
But I'm going to do a lightning round with you.
Yes.
Okay. So what are you most proud of in your life?
I, always my children, they're, three fantastic human beings. And I would say that was the greatest thing was becoming a mother. So, much as I've achieved, and I think, well, then I would say also my relationship with a higher power is something I'm proud of.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. What was the hardest thing about being a parent for you?
Um, Nobody tells you about the terrible 32s. The terrible twos, and all that. They continue to be your children, and there continue to be difficult times. It's not a cakewalk after they graduate. They still have issues, and they still challenge me. They still challenge me.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. I say to my daughter, I said, you want to know the secret to motherhood? You want to know it? Come here, I'll tell you. You're going to screw up. Bottom line, that's going to happen, right?
There you go. And they're mirrors,
Yep.
it's like whatever I see in them I don't like, it's like, guess who put it there, or where did they get that from,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So what has been the easiest thing for you in parenting?
Um, well, receiving their love when it comes. I mean, that's bliss. I got a beautiful Mother's Day card from my younger daughter, and just, such appreciation. There's just like, well, that's easy to let that in. That's, the deepest joy is, when they acknowledge, that, you know, they're happy with me as a mother. I'm still, I still worry about that.
Yeah.
What's my
I don't
impact?
know. I still do too. I don't know how you stop worrying about that.
Yeah.
So what has been the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur for you?
I think, being 100% responsible for everything that happens in my business. There's no one to blame. There's no one to, pass the buck off to. It's, the buck stops here every day, every hour of every day. So that can be overwhelming. But on the other end, side of that is that I get to celebrate everything. It's all me all the time, and that can be incredibly hard. But I've just, established a network that I always have somebody to ask something of. It's, being alone, the isolation. I think a lot of my clients talk about isolation
Yeah.
as being very difficult.
Having peers is if you're a soul,
You
you're
really
soul.
have to build. There's no water cooler, and you really have to build it yourself.
Yeah.
And I've really done a great job with that. I don't tweet particularly, but I'll say, does anybody know a good something, or what do you think of this? And I call it my brain trust, and I'll get a response back in 10 or 15 minutes, which is amazing.
Wow.
A high level response.
Wow.
Because I think, because if I can help somebody else, if I see one of those in my inbox, it's like, I'm going to do that instead of what I have to do. Let me help Cindy, because it's so rewarding to help somebody else. And so people give me really, if I say, what would you say to this person? I'll get 3 responses back. It's like, yes, fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not alone. We're not alone if we avail ourselves of that generosity.
Yeah. Because we can't do it alone. So now, what is the thing you love most about being an entrepreneur?
I love the autonomy. I love the flexibility. I love that. And I love that I don't have a boss. I don't have anybody making me do anything I don't want to do, not giving me vacation days or not understanding the situation. There it is. There's all me all the time again.
Yeah. 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 And if you don't like your boss, you better have a talk with her in the mirror.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
Okay. So you already kind of answered this, but what has been your kryptonite?
Yeah, that was hard. First of all, I forgot what kryptonite was. It's the thing that kills you, right? So
Kills Superman.
it was criticism. And then I had an experience I was taking a writing class at Gotham Writers, and they do what's called workshopping. You would give 10 pages to everybody in the class, and then they would critique it. And, the teacher was watching me just sort of fade out. And he goes, "Are you okay, Jane?" I said, "Yes, it's very painful for me." And he said, "All we want is for you to be a better writer." And so I took every note that everybody gave, and I applied it, and I brought it back, and it was so much better. Because when my mother criticized me, it was personal. It was mean spirited. And 99.9% of human beings don't criticize to make you feel bad. They criticize to actually help you grow.
Whoa.
But
So
yeah.
like now when you said that, because the next question is what has been your superpower? And I'm like, dude, that's such a superpower. Take that criticism and then make it into something that, wow.
Yeah, and I think it's the connection that I've gotten through spirituality, that I've allowed people in, that I've allowed them to see my belly, and to reveal, open the kimono to people, to let them in. We're all the same, and to trust that they have my back, and I get incredible support and feedback, just beautiful. And then I'm willing to try something. I say, okay, I tried that, and here's the feedback I got, so I don't feel like my back is against a wall.
Well, I really love that part of our work together when I never felt like you were above me or that you had it all together, and you would share your stuff with me, even things that were happening right then and there. And it was always like, oh, wow. Because we really love it when people are authentic and real, that was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And one of the things, that I've loved most about coaching, when I was learning to be a coach in 2005, 2006, we had what's called a pod. There were 9 of us, and there was a leader, and he would say something and somebody would blurt something out. It was like, I thought that, I was thinking that. And what I learned was to say what I'm thinking, because that intuitive thought, no matter how abstract it is, actually is coming from you and me. Our relationship is creating that. And so I'll say things, that feel right. And the feedback I've gotten from my clients, I mean, I've been coaching since 2002. It's a long time. Is like, oh, that's amazing that you thought that. I can feel, I'm empathic. I can feel your chest tightening. I can feel your solar plexus, so that's a gift. But also to blurt out, what I do, share my experience with you, has always been helpful. Nobody has said, oh, that's irrelevant. It's like, oh, thank you. Because it's real,
Oh, yeah.
it's authentic, and it's,
That was
happening in real
completely
time.
helpful, especially when you could like be intuitive and just, and you were like so right on. And then one of the things when you have a problem and also when you have some emotionality around that problem is that we do not think well at all. That frontal lobe is shut down. So when somebody comes in with just that intuitive thought, it's like, you would open up a door and be like, whoa, I never even saw that. How could I have been so blind? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, this is a question. I don't even know where I would go with this myself, but what accomplished person that either dead or alive, would you like to spend an hour with?
Hands down, no question, Michelle Obama.
Wow.
Yeah, I would love to. I loved her book. I watched her show on Netflix. I wrote her a thank you note for her honesty. Talk about authentic. Oh my God. She was the one, she was the one who really, talk about, the most successful person you can imagine. She didn't necessarily feel that way all the time. She was living in a prison in the White House.
Mm.
They had to sneak out to see that when I think gay marriage was passed. And she and Malia or something like snuck out because they wanted to see the rainbow on the White House. And she's just like, I'm going out, without the Secret Service. She was really held prisoner in that. I adore her. And I think she's a marvelous woman and leader and thinker and, service oriented. I would love to spend an hour with her.
Well, maybe she will hear this interview and call you up.
Hi, Michelle. Anytime. I'm at your disposal. Malia and I have the same birthday, July 4th.
Oh, there we go. You have a connection.
I do.
So what is your goddess archetype, would you say?
I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is.
Like I would just say, like the mythical, like goddesses, like Athena, Artemis.
I'm not conversant enough to know.
Okay.
Actually, yeah. Sorry.
Well, do you have any archetype that you think that you would consider?
When we had to do a future self exercise in coaching, it was kind of like the wise crone, just a wise woman. And I thought of Judy Collins with her gray hair, just somebody who's been there, kind of a mother nature type, someone where I could curl up in their wisdom.
Yeah, I can definitely see that with you. And also too with your eggs, I would just say, Mother Nature, Gaia. There's something
there you go.
about you.
There you go. Yeah, that raised the hair on my arms. Yeah, there you go.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. A cartoon character that you related to as a child.
Yeah. Well, understand that when I was growing up, there was Mighty Mouse, Tom and Jerry, who are the blackbirds, the crows. Who were they?
I don't remember those.
I can't think of their names now, but there were, so I would have to go with Popeye. He would like be in this dilemma, and then he would, crush a can of spinach and open it up, and then, woo, and because otherwise it would be Betty Boop or Betty and Veronica.
Well,
So
I think Popeye's a great one.
I think
I
so.
think
He
Barbara's good
would
at that.
whirl around, and then his muscles would grow, and
Yeah.
but my spinach is going to God, or calling somebody in my community, and it's like, okay, I've got I can go back into the ring now.
Yeah, yeah. And your resourcefulness. I think you were, really,
Yeah,
as I said earlier, a self-made woman. Like you've
yeah,
had these challenges and your resourcefulness. So you find your spinach and totally,
yeah.
that's totally you. So what is left on your bucket list that you would like to be able to?
I've done so much. Each of my children are married. I mean, that was a huge. There's actually a Yiddish word, mazinka, which is when all your children are married. There's like a celebration for the parents where they sweep up after them. So that was like, not that I accomplished it, but we were able to find partners and are successfully on their own. So I think just travel. I don't want to own anything more than I have. I just want to see more of the world. When I went around the world on this semester at sea, we went to 11 countries, something 14, anyhow, it was a lot of countries. And, they said you can cross those off. It's like, no, I just add more and more, because I'd like to go back to Vietnam. I'd like to go back to Burma. I'd love to spend time in India. So I think more travel and deeper introspection, maybe meditation retreats, maybe a 30-day meditation retreat or something to go in more, but nothing material. Oh, and I'd like to speak all over. I'd like to, continue speaking.
Yeah.
I love, sharing, what I know with people who want to hear my message.
And let's just almost need to finish up here, but I want to ask you, how are you using this book to speak to women and people about your message? And that's
Yeah, I have to say that it's fallen off with I was going to do a virtual book tour, and that just kind of, I'll have to wait and see how it resurges after, we were back, and see what the demand is. I did one book club with divorced women's group that was wonderful. I want to be available to people. I'm not sure how that will manifest.
Yeah, what I love about you saying it that way is just that you're so open and that you're accepting how
Yeah,
things are. And, right now, I think everything has been thrown up in the air,
exactly.
and we don't really know where things are going to land yet.
Exactly.
There isn't those answers. And that's very realistic, but also I love how you're so accepting about it and centered with that, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are kind of freaking out in a certain way too. So that's really
No, I don't think freaking out's in my vocabulary anymore. I don't think so.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I wish that was not part of my vocabulary. So
Yeah.
thank you, Jane. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much
Cindy.
for this time and for
Pleasure to
all
be with
that
you.
you've done for me. I'm just so grateful to you. And I'm sure that our relationship is not over. We'll still be working together in the future. And
Yeah.
I just really am very grateful for you in my
Thank
life.
you so much.
Yeah. Blessings to you.
Yeah. Blessings.
Yeah. Namaste.
Thanks.